This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, dear members, industry colleagues, and respected speakers. A hearty welcome to all of you to today's web seminar on Decode the Benefits of Atma Nirbhar Bharat initiative and labor laws for German companies, organized by the German Engineering Federation VDMA with Rodl Partner Consulting Private Limited. We hope all of you and your family and colleagues are safe and doing well. I'm Jamli John, based out of the Mumbai office of VDMA, and I'll be taking you through the session today. Before we continue, I request all of you to kindly mute yourselves, kindly keep the cameras on the active camera mode, and you could kindly continue to post your questions in the chat box, and we'll take up the questions during the last leg of the web seminar. The German Engineering Federation, VDMA, in association with Rodl Partner Consulting Private Limited, have collaborated to prepare a white paper capturing the Self-reliant India Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan and challenges faced by VDMA members and German companies, and provide the suggestions which may assist the companies in tackling the problems faced in the present situation. After the last interaction with Invest India with the support of the German Council at Mumbai, VDMA India and Rodl Partner are delegated with the responsibility to collect the feedback from the market leaders and prepare the white paper, which shall be forwarded to Invest India. Therefore, we may kindly request you to kindly participate in the survey, which we have already shared with you. Next slide. VDMA, the Mechanical Engineering Industry Association, was founded in November 1892 and is the most important voice for the mechanical engineering industry. VDMA presently represents around 3,300 mostly medium-sized companies, making it the largest industry association in Europe. It is currently contributing to 78% as exports, which is equal to recognizing the very early significance of India as a future market for member companies. India is one of the first overseas offices among the BRIC countries. VDMA is the only German industrial association having well-established offices in India since several years, with a presence being in Noida, Kolkata, Mumbai, and Bangalore. Next slide. For today's web seminar, we will have the welcome address from Mr. Rajesh Nag, Managing Director of VDMA India. We have amongst us Dr. Jürgen Mohart, the Consul General of the Republic of Germany, Mumbai, as an esteemed chief guest. Dr. Mohart shall make a special address to us. This will be followed by the presentations from Rodl Partner. Mr. Rahul Oza, who is the partner and head for Mumbai and Pune offices, will guide us on the policy changes initiated by the Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Ms. Apurva Singh, Senior Consultant and Legal, shall address the topic on labor codes. And our last speaker for today is Ms. Isha Umbarkar, Senior Consultant in Direct Tax, who shall touch upon the indirect tax specification in relation to Atma Nirbhar Bharat. This will be followed by the Q&A session in the end. With no further delay, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Nag. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jamli, and good morning, members and friends from the industry. Thank you for joining us today for this very important and relevant web seminar on decoding the benefits of Atma Nirbhar Bharat initiative and labor laws for German companies, being organized by the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, in association with our eminent partners, Rodl Partner, with the support of the German Consulate, Mumbai. We are privileged to welcome Dr. Jürgen Mohart, Consul General of the Federal Republic of Germany, Mumbai. Thank you, Dr. Mohart, for joining us today. I also extend a warm welcome to Mr. Rahul Oza, partner and head of Mumbai and Pune office of Rodl Partner, and his young and charming colleagues Apurva and Isha. So thank you for joining us today. Friends, Atma Nirbhar Bharat 3.0, or the third set of COVID-19 economic stimulus, announced by the Finance Minister on November 12, 2020, spelled out the production-linked incentive or PLI scheme in its current scope and size. The government added 10 sectors with a commitment to set aside rupees 1.46 lakh crores over 5 years. This was in addition to the 3 sectors: electronics, pharmaceutical, and medical devices, which had totaled 51,311 crores that were already under this scheme. PLI was conceived to set off the higher cost of manufacturing in India. It seeks to cushion industry from higher costs due to steeper tax rates, finance costs, power tariffs, and land prices. A parliamentary panel recently said that the logistic costs alone account for 13% of India's GDP, higher than developed countries' figures of less than 10%. Then the COVID-19 induced hardships made this scheme even more useful for the industry. Friends, India has over the years offered many incentives to attract manufacturing investment. One was tax holidays in specific locations. Manufacturing in union territories like Puducherry or hill stations like Himachal Pradesh did benefit through these schemes. Then there were the manufacturing parks along with the tax benefits. Investors could utilize common services and infrastructure. Special economic zones offered incentives exclusively for export-oriented units. Many tax schemes got rationalized with the introduction of the goods and service tax. Now, the big advantage of the PLI scheme is that it supplements all other SOPs. It is not location specific and has actually nothing to do with the tax. Hence, the government will pay a certain percentage of value of additional production companies make after fulfilling prefixed annual incremental investment and production criteria. Under PLI, companies will earn as direct payments on average 5 to 6% more than what they would get otherwise. While for companies it is a top-up incentive, for the government it is assured additional investment, production, as well as job creation for every rupee it spends as incentives. Most importantly, it is WTO compliant. At present, approvals for eligible companies have been given for 3 sectors, though the list is not complete. In case of pharmaceutical and medical device segments also. Of the remaining 10 sectors, cabinet approvals for 6 pharmaceutical products like complex generics, biopharmaceuticals. Then we have the IT hardware products like laptops, tablets, personal computers and servers, telecom and networking products, food processing, white goods like air conditioners and LEDs, and solar PV modules are also in place. Now, moving from PLI to the labor codes, India's labor law regime is being substantially revised with 4 new labor codes. The Labor Ministry has amalgamated 29 labor laws into 4 codes to significantly reduce the compliance burden, improve the ease of doing business, make hiring and firing of workers easier, and provide enhanced flexibility to employers in terms of work hours. Our knowledgeable speakers today will deep dive and analyze the benefits of these incentives also. However, before that, I would like to invite the German Consul General in Mumbai, Dr. Mohad, for his special address. Also, on behalf of all our members in the Western region and the Indo-German fraternity, I would like to thank Dr. Mohad for his proactive role throughout the pandemic in supporting German companies and the VDMA members. Thank you, Dr. Mohad, for all your initiative and endeavors. And we look forward now to the updates from your side. Thank you. And over to you, Dr. Mohad.
Good morning, everybody. So I have to say I have a little bit of problem to get my head clear now for joining you here, because I think like everybody else, how you start your day and what you see your mind is mostly preoccupied is this huge humanitarian crisis India is facing. Right? It's not only abstract what you get from the news only and what you see in the papers. No, I think everybody who is in charge of a company in operations, you start your day and only most number one concern is not your turnover, your sales, or like us, our operations. No, it's the well-being of the staff. And that is the utmost concern, and how if somebody got sick, how to help him and how to operate him. And there has been a lot of being international attention now to India, and I'm very happy to see that also Germany and German industry has been at the forefront of helping. Of course, one of the major German companies, Linde, is the one who is manufacturing now and providing the most needed supply of our oxygen. And I'm very happy that the German government could help to airlift in, and there are many NGOs helping to donate. But my special appreciation also goes to all the German companies in India who have joined the many initiatives from different organizations which are offering help at different locations in India, or do their utmost, as I understand, continuing CSR projects in their immediate neighborhood. So thank you so much. This is contributing not only to alleviate the plight of the Indian people, but also contributing a lot to the image and our self-understanding how German industry sees themselves here in India. Then, of course, I think today it's excellent timing now despite what I said, now we have to face also on the business reality. And today's seminar is excellent timing because today we're going to see the Indian EU summit, and which is also has a very special importance. But we all know that the European Union is India's largest trading partner. So far, the EU is India's second largest destination for its trade, and the trade relations have been ever expanding. I also include, of course, the services industries in here, not only the hardware industries. And we are very hopeful that today negotiations for comprehensive free trade agreement could be launched, right? There have been some lot of roadblocks in the past, but we have seen that India changed its mindset for certain reasons, political reasons, and of course economic reasons, and is turning rather its way now west. And we have seen they have concluded some major projects and understandings, what to say, MOUs. Basically, it's always the intentions only with Great Britain, UK, and I'm very good to hear that what I hear from the preparation of today's summit, that both sides are really eager to move forward. Maybe it's not as comprehensive as everybody thought, and I only hope that also here common sense will prevail, and they will be looking for the low-hanging fruits, right? That is basically what we need. Of course, we have been with our friend Rahul in contact for other events here. A free trade agreement is beneficial for everybody. There are many different points why it is beneficial. And in particular, it would be very helpful if it could help us to create a level playing field for German companies in India. That's the most important thing. And of course, to tackle all the hidden trade barriers, we are still there. It's nice to have, everybody will profit. But of course, as I said, there's the most important point for Indian companies, if there will be FTA coming or not coming immediately, is of course we still have to work to understand what are our stumbling blocks here, what is hindering us, what can be done to have a level playing field inside India, because there's no questions with the German companies who are here and are participating to here are here not because of a FTA, they are here because of the market position and of the perspective of the Indian market and of their market success so far. I make a lot of calls and reaching out to different Indian companies in my jurisdiction, also to understand how much they are affected by COVID and their business. And of course, all the companies basically tell me that compared to last year, the situation with COVID, of course, is a huge challenge for them. And sometimes is also has an impact on their operations. Interestingly, it's not so much a problem to follow the SUPs inside the factories. This is easy to do comparatively, but some companies reported me that they have now a shortage and rather have a fallout of their sales force, right? This is a completely other side of the coin. But on the other hand, there are still many, like the companies participating today, hidden champions who have excellent market positions and doing excellently well despite many different lockdowns positions and regulations for companies to operate today. This is very encouraging because it shows only how well German industry are positioned here. And in India, and many of the companies are just reconfirming that they're going to move on with their expansion plans for the future, that they move on to make India as more important hub as before, for many reasons. First of all, it's a market perspective. And then, of course, what we see worldwide, that the second COVID crisis now will completely change the thinking on things, how procured, how supply chains have been set up in the past. And I think this just-in-time deliveries is something of the past. And we will see now a more diversification where also India will benefit. And what is also encouraging to see that the German companies, of course, because they are already multinationals operating here, it means they have other companies and sister companies in other parts of the world, or having in Germany, they have been already, because of the structure, much more independent from supplies interruptions like other companies. Due to their networks, they have been independent, they're much more independent from to survive out of financial constraints, because inside the group you could help. And of course, they have been much more successful also to find new niche markets and look for exports inside their own group or other countries. And in the very end, some of the companies told me that now they do much better business than before, which has something to do because they were gaining market share. That is also because their structures, the German companies already having, helped them to gain market shares in these very difficult, trying times during the 1.5 last years. So thank you very much now for this excellent survey we are doing together. You are doing VDMA, because we really have to understand also the fine prints, the nitty-gritty things in daily operations. And as you said, and I'm very happy that VDMA and Rodl and partner are working together on this, because in the very end, it only will help us to give better advice and better guidance to all our companies to do even much more better than at the moment in India than ever before. Whenever the company is there and he doesn't know how to help at the COVID crisis, please don't hesitate to write to me or VDMA. We have many initiatives. We have set up a logistic group with all the logistic companies from Germany who might help to bring help goods into India as it might be possible. And of course, we try to coordinate this, I said this here, through the embassy, because otherwise we will have run into many more stumbling blocks with customs duties and so on. So we have also created a platform at the embassy in Delhi, so who wants to help bringing in something from Germany and saying that please contact me myself, but I'm pretty sure that all the companies present already have their structures in their neighborhood and doing their utmost. So now, thank you very much again for this year and today. I wish the whole session today good discussions, but I think I'm looking also forward then, of course, to a very successful participation in the surveys. Please all participate, even if it takes some time. It's very important to understand, to analyze, because only on this findings, we will be able to decide on further steps of support. So thank you. And all of you again, stay healthy, and hope to see you one time again in person for other events.
Thank you, Dr. Mohad. I think that is what is important at this stage, to stay healthy and safe. And thank you also for updating us, Dr. Mohad. And I think it's a initiative, especially the free trade agreement discussions, because I think the last 6 years almost it has been late of ice, and it's nice that the discussions would start and commence. And also thanks for updating us on the initiative and efforts of the German government to support India in this time of crisis. And again, Dr. Mohad, on behalf of VDMA, thank you for all your efforts and your proactive role in supporting members. Thank you.
Okay, of course, but finally, of course, as you mentioned, please don't hesitate to contact us as before whenever there is a problem with government regulations, with government agencies, and wherever, we are here to help to sort this out. And I have to apologize because I have to join now another meeting. So all the best to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr.
Over
Mohad.
to Jamie.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Nath. Thank you, Dr. Mohad, for joining us and guiding us through. And I'm sure you will be the torchbearer for all of us. We would now like to invite our speakers from Rodl and Partner Consulting Private Limited, Mr. Rahul Loza, Ms. Apurva Singh, and Ms. Isha Umbarkar to kindly take over the proceedings. Over to Rahul.
Thank you very much, Jamli. Thank you, Mr. Rajesh Nath. Thank you, Mr. Mohad, for your kind introduction. Yes, I hope everyone is safe. I'm pretty sure that like Rodl and Partner, everyone from the esteemed member companies are taking care of their team members and their well-being. I totally agree what Mr. Mohad said. Every morning starts what to do now to keep the people safe. And we, for example, have established a task force which is organizing oxygen concentrators, hospital beds for our team members and their direct family members. We have initiated now a vaccination drive to keep our people safe at our Pune location and surrounding as well with some facility to vaccinate our people in our other offices. We will shortly send to all our clients an invitation for the vaccination drive to participate here. We have tied up with one esteemed hospital chain and which is supporting us in this. I invite hereby as well everyone to join here. It is, I think, of utmost importance that we keep our people safe. So nevertheless, as said earlier already, yes, we have to look what is the future, because that gives some optimism, and therefore I'm happy to be here with VDMA to decode, at least attempt to decode, the benefits of Atma Nirbhar. Earlier this year, we had a similar webinar, so I will keep my presentation a little shorter so that my very talented and esteemed colleagues Apurva and Isha can give you a more closer look out of certain areas. Good. Next slide, please. Next slide. Whoever doesn't know me, you can read it afterwards. Let's come to the more important topics. Next slide, please. Yeah, the Atma Nirbhar has 5 pillars. The 5 pillars are the infrastructure, technological driven systems, vibrant demography, demand, and if we fulfill all these 4 steps, then but naturally the economy will be boosting itself. Is it something new? I don't know. I don't feel. It is a strengthening of the already proclaimed and vision, or the vision of the government of India since 2014. We need a structural change in India. The structural change from a service hub to a manufacturing hub needs a lot of attention and changes in our economical system. Next slide, please. Under this, the government has launched, from my perspective, the 5 more most important schemes: Make in India, Skill India, Clean India, Digital India, and Startup India. All these work hand in hand together. if we want to have make in India, we need as well skilled people. In order to skill the people, we need tie-ups, global tie-ups, which we have, for example, in a very esteemed manner with the Federal Republic of Germany. There are several bilateral um, opportunities to further boost the Skill India system. I must say as well, the latest reform of the education system works towards that. Clean India, we know as well that India is one of the most carbon polluting countries. And I'm happy to see that India is actually from all developing nations the most focused on a environmental political regime, and that will boost the future. That will boost as well the reputation of India, because the globe is going clean and green, and being here a part of that will put us into a good position. Furthermore, we can see as well a huge boost in renewable energy sector, which is obviously a job creator and helps as well our infrastructure. Digital India is a very important thing, because every one of us who is trying to set up a manufacturing facility in the surroundings of Pune or Mumbai will face this one particular sentence from Germany, from their German headquarters. Oh my God, the prices are too high. Obviously, because if you want to have a manufacturing setup next to Stuttgart suburbs, it will cost you as well a lot. So therefore, a digital India will as well develop and support the rural India, because it will connect the entire India and give an let me say an opportunity to German companies to invest as well in further remote locations. Startup India, I'm very happy about that, because that India has not given up on the huge intellectual technological hub which we have in India, and that gives a lot of benefit to many German companies as well, because they are more and more looking into the technological startups in India. Next slide, please. These are definitely areas, and if you are honest with yourself, you will agree that these factors are the back-pulling factors of the Indian economy or the growth of India. We need an efficient administration. We need ease of doing business. We need the structural change. We need to protect the environment, because this is, as I said earlier, the need of the hour. We need to improve the working conditions, and Apurva will talk as well about that. We need to improve the infrastructure. And who else than German companies are, with the German technology of the most highest infrastructure country, and still crying about the worst in being lacking behind nowadays. The big German self-criticism shows as well some good point why Germany is getting always up. Corruption is important to be fought, and we have to eliminate the shadow economy. Next slide, please. We have segmented here 2 phases, 2016 to 2019 changes which have happened significantly, and then the second wave under the influence of Atma Nirbhar to 2020-2021. You can see a lot has happened. You may or may not see the relevance of all these changes, but I can assure you all these factors are mosaic stones to create a positive picture of India. Next slide, please. So with this, I would like to hand over to Isha. Isha is our senior consultant in our direct text team. Usually you see her partner, which is Anand Ketan. But I think for New India, we need to show as well new faces from Rodl and partner. Over to you, Isha.
Thank you, Mr. Rosa, for your insights on the Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Good morning to all the member companies and participants. I hope you are doing well in the second wave of COVID-19. Next slide, please. Next slide. Being a consumer nation, India has been a net importer of products under various sectors. With the first wave of COVID-19 virus, the supply chain over the worldwide was disrupted. During such time, the Indian government realized the importance of enhancement of production of goods, which are heavily imported into India. With introduction of Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, the government of India wants to aid such sectors and make India self-reliant. While Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan specifically aims at enhancing the manufacturing of certain goods in India, it is in line with the Make in India initiative, which was earlier introduced by the government of India. Under the incentives laid down in the Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, as rightly pointed out and explained by Mr. Rajesh Nath, production-linked incentive schemes were introduced for 10 new sectors. Further, in the annual budget for 2021, significant amount of funds were allocated towards these PLI schemes. Along with the above announcements, the Indian government has released various other schemes and measures to support the Make in India initiative and Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Launching of customs bonded warehousing facility for the manufacturers of India by the CBIC and state industrial policies by various states have also aided these initiatives. All these relevant policies, schemes, and initiatives are discussed in detail in the following slides. Next slide, please. Bonded warehousing is termed as a key factor in India's journey for becoming a global manufacturing hub. The facility of bonded warehousing gives an emphasis on Make in India initiative and ease of doing business in India. Further, as the other export incentives such as EPCG, SEZ, and EOU may be discontinued due to the ongoing dispute of India at the World Trade Organization, bonded warehousing seems to be the future of export incentives in India. This is a facility where imported goods can be stored for further manufacturing as well as associated activities like packaging, repacking, labeling, etc. by any manufacturer in India. In the slide in front of you, we have tried to demonstrate the broad level of supply chain structure for a bonded warehouse. As you'll be able to see on the top left corner of the slide, that the payment of customs duty and IGST on imported goods would be deferred till the point in time when these goods are manufactured in the customs bonded warehouse and cleared for domestic supply. In case these goods are used for manufacturing of goods which are directly exported out of India, then no customs duty would be payable on import of such goods. Further, from on the bottom left corner of the slide, you can see that a bonded warehouse can also procure goods locally by payment of applicable GST. Such GST can be utilized as input tax credit for payment of GST on domestic supplies. As we have understood the broad structure of bonded warehouse, in the next slide, we would see the various benefits available under the scheme. Next slide, please. As earlier discussed, the raw material and capital goods required for the process of manufacturing can be imported into India without payment of customs duty if such goods are supposed to be exported out of India. However, in case the goods are supposed to be supplied domestically, then customs duty and IGST is payable on the import of goods which were procured for manufacturing of the final finished goods. But no interest would be charged for such late payment of customs duty and IGST. Similarly, there are no export commitments or obligations which a customs bonded warehouse is required to fulfill, as under some other incentives like EPCG or advance authorization. Manufactured, unlike SEZ unit, there are no geographical restrictions on the location of the warehouse, and same can be chosen by the manufacturer based on other commercial parameters. Further, even an existing business premises can be converted into a bonded warehouse, and the manufacturer is not required to establish a new place of business or a new entity for obtaining the license. Even the license under a customs bonded warehouse is valid perpetually and is not required to be renewed on an annual or periodical basis. There are no physical supervision or interventions by the customs authorities, so that the manufacturer can focus on the core activities of business. Lastly, I would like to highlight that no additional fees or annual fees or setup fees is charged by the government for providing such license. With all these benefits, this scheme seems to be the best solution while establishing a manufacturing unit in India. Next slide, please. Remission of duties and taxes on exported products was announced in September 2019 and has been implemented from January 2021. This scheme was introduced to reimburse the duties and taxes which are levied at central, state, and local levels and are not refunded under any other scheme. These taxes generally involve mandi tax, coal cess, VAT and central excise on fuel, etc. This scheme is predominantly designed to replace the already existing MEIS scheme. MEIS scheme was introduced under the FTP for 2015 to 20, and which is expected to be phased out due to the dispute of India and in the World Trade Organization. All the sectors which are covered under MEIS currently will be eventually moved to the scheme, and all these sectors would be eligible for refund of taxes mentioned earlier. A dedicated committee would decide the sequence of introduction of such sectors under the scheme. In line with Digital India, under the scheme, refund would be issued to exporters in the form of transferable duty credit scripts, which would be maintained in electronic credit ledger by IceGate portal. At the port, the exporter would be required to provide details of refund of such taxes in the shipping bill filed for export of goods. Unlike certain other export incentives, this incentive is compliant with the World Trade Organization norms. This scheme would create a level playing field for exporters in international market and boost to employment generation in India. Next slide, please. The Central Board of Indirect Taxes, that is CBIC, provides indirect support to the manufacturing sector in India by imposing tariff and non-tariff barriers for restricting import of certain goods and in turn promoting manufacturing of such goods in India. These barriers are in line with Make in India initiative and Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Under the tariff barriers, higher rate of duties and taxes are charged on finished goods, whereas raw material for manufacturing of such goods are levied with lower rate of taxes. As an example of this is motor vehicles, where the finished goods are taxed at much higher customs duty rate, The raw material for manufacturing of motor vehicles are taxed at a much lower rate. Further, since the last two annual budget, the nation has seen an increase in duty rates for commodities for which the government wants to promote manufacturing in India. Also, in the Union Budget for 2021, it was announced that the central government would be reviewing more than 400 customs notifications and exemptions for import of goods may be waived off. These exemptions are likely to be reviewed in the view of Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, where the goods which are required to be manufactured in India may not be provided any exemption. Further, in order to curb import of goods which are dumped in the Indian market at extremely low prices, the government levies additional duties such as safeguard duty, anti-dumping duty on specified goods arriving from specified territories or countries. Apart from the tariff barriers imposed by the CBIC, there are certain non-tariff barriers such as additional licensing requirement, prohibition or restriction on import of certain finished goods, etc. At present, certain goods which are to be imported into India require Bureau of Indian Standards approval so that a certain level of quality standard is maintained for import of such goods in India. To avoid import of cheap quality products into India, some of the examples where such licensing is required are electronics, toys, certain item of furniture, etc. Further, direct import of television and air conditioners are not allowed into India, whereas the import of raw material for their manufacture is allowed. Over the time, it has been observed that the importers were taking undue advantage of free trade agreements with certain nations. To curb these incorrect practices, CBIC has introduced the Customs Administration of Rules of Origin under Trade Agreements Rules 2020, which would require the importer to provide relevant documents to prove the eligibility to claim benefit under the free trade agreements. With these tariff and non-tariff barriers, the Government of India indirectly provides a boost to the Indian manufacturing industry. Next slide, please. Mr. Nath has already covered a lot of points on the production-linked incentive scheme. I would like to further discuss the scheme in this slide. Production-linked incentive scheme are a tool used by the Government of India to promote the manufacturing under certain sectors in India. These schemes aim at making India an integral part of the global supply chains and enhancing the exports from India, creating complete component ecosystem in India to align with Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, attracting global investments and technology into India for manufacturing world-class products and generation of large-scale employment opportunities in India. At the time of announcement of Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, the government announced PLI schemes for 10 new sectors. With 3 already existing sectors under the PLI scheme, the current count has increased to 13. A list of these sectors can be seen on the right side of the slide, which is in front of you. Out of these sectors, mobile manufacturing, drug and medical device manufacturing sectors were already covered under the PLI schemes. Further, the policies for manufacturing of electronics, pharmaceutical drugs, telecom products, food products, solar products, and white goods are being approved and released by the specified ministries. However, the policies for ACC battery, automobile components, textile products, and specialty steel are pending for approval and would be approved soon. The incentives under the PLI scheme are based on 3 major criteria, which are the production of eligible goods falling in the target sector, investment criteria, and sales criteria. Investment criteria is prescribed as incremental, cumulative, and annual investment over base year, where the base year is defined in the scheme. Separate thresholds are prescribed for each scheme, and the qualifying investment expenditure specifically excludes the land and building cost. Sales criteria is prescribed as incremental turnover over base year, where the base year is defined in the scheme. Separate thresholds are also prescribed for different products. At present, the notified schemes do not include sales turnover as qualifying criteria, and further, credit notes and discounts are also excluded from sales for qualifying criteria. The incentive ranges around 4 to 6% on incremental sales. Further, additional incentives for globalizing brands in the form of branding and marketing support may also be provided. With the introduction of 10 new sectors in the PLI scheme, the government has opened doors for development of these schemes in the Indian manufacturing industry. Next slide, please. Along with policies announced by the central government, the state government has also released state industrial policies. Some of the recent policies introduced by the state government are Maharashtra Industrial Policy announced in 2019, Gujarat and Andhra Pradesh Industrial Policy announced in 2020, and recently Tamil Nadu Industrial Policy has been announced in 2021. These policies are introduced by the governments to attract global investments and increase the quantum of exports from the respective states. These policies also aim at employment generation within the state and to promote innovation through introduction of world-class technologies. While these policies offer non-monetary incentives such as infrastructure and ease of doing business, these policies also offer monetary incentives. Due to time constraint, we would not be able to discuss the individual policies. However, we would be discussing certain highlights. Some state policies provide incentive in the form of refund of SGST payable for a certain period, while most of the policies also provide capital and interest subsidies to the businesses for acquiring funds to establish and expand business activities in the respective states. Some states also provide facility to obtain land either on subsidized rates or long-term lease from the government. In order to set up a business premises in these states, an entity must analyze the benefits available under respective states and accordingly decide the best opportunity available in respective states and go ahead with the incorporation. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation and request Ms. Apurva Singh to introduce us to the new labor codes.
Thank you very much, Isha. So without further ado, a very good afternoon to everyone. So thank you for taking out the time to attend this webinar. So the Code of Wages, the Social Security Code, the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions, and the Industrial Relations Code basically consolidate your 29 current central labor laws relating to the wages, social security, occupational safety, and industrial disputes into 4 codes. Can we please move to the main slide, the content? Now, what important aspect which has to be covered here is what is the exact objective behind introducing these bold labor reforms. So as you know, some of the Indian labor laws are more than 60 years old. There are currently multiple labor laws with archaic, rigid provisions and serious inconsistency in their provisions. This has often resulted in the distinct compliances, increasing the compliance burden on firms, and has often resulted in poor labor law enforcement at one hand, and on the other hand has caused resistance amongst the foreign market players and even domestic investors for that matter to fully tap the potential Indian market. India, being an industrialist country, can no longer have socialistic labor laws, and this is an underlying objective of these labor codes. Basically, the labor codes closely reveals that an attempt to strike a balance between the expectations of the employers by way of introducing flexibility in the employment, reducing compliance burden, and at the same time without compromising on the protecting the workers' basic rights. All in all, this will basically further create employment opportunities and contribute towards further our Indian economy. Another point to be noted here is that with diluting this rigid compliance requirements as we get to see in these labor codes, the labor codes also at the same time ensures transparency, higher accountability, and accordingly the compliance will be stricter, harsher through imposing heavy penalties so there are no lapses. So with respect to the implementation date, as you're already aware that the implementation date of 4 labor codes have been further deferred, which was earlier expected to have come into force by 1st of April 2021. The draft rules have already been finalized by the central government, but the state governments are yet to frame and notify these rules under the code to bring into force into their respective jurisdiction. This adjournment in the implementation definitely gives a buffer period to industries to prepare themselves in adopting the new changes to be introduced by these labor codes. Next slide, please. Let us have a bird eye view of the key changes which are to be brought by these labor codes. As you can see, the first is the minimum living standards to workers with fixing floor wages. The central government shall have the power to fix the floor wage, taking into account minimum living standards of a worker for a different geographical areas. And for private sector establishments, the state government shall have the authority to fix the minimum rate of wages. It is pertinent to note the minimum wage which would be fixed by the state government cannot be lower than the floor wage. We also see the employment flexibility in terms of ease of hiring and firing. There is introduction of fixed term employment, allowing companies across sectors to hire workers on a short-term assignment basis. Industrial Relations Code, as you can see, permits now companies up to 300 workers with regard to retrenchment, closure, and layoff without the requirement of prior government approval. Currently, the threshold is, as of now, is 100 or more workers. Another important and a very welcoming, from my perspective, which I can see, is regarding the change in the inspection system under the code, which is set to form a conducive environment for enforcement of labor laws with transparency and accountability, and to a certain extent curtail this when it comes to corruption and even the unnecessary harassment which often companies face from the inspectors. Establishments will be randomly selected and inspectors will be chosen through randomized web scheme. Further now, another important feature is that the role of the inspector has been changed, is not only limiting to inspecting the compliances, but it has become more of a facilitator. So that means they also play the role of assisting and consulting assisting companies to comply with these labor laws, labor codes, and a reasonable opportunity would also be given to the industries and to the employers to comply with these labor codes. Next slide, please. Now, the main talked about code is the wage code. As you can see, the wage code merges the 4 current existing labor laws, which is the payment of wages, the minimum wages, the payment of bonus act, and the equal remuneration act into a single piece of legislation. At present, there are almost 12 definitions of wages under different labor laws, often has leading into litigation and difficulty in implementation. For dealing with this issue, the wage code has provided a uniform definition of wages. As you can see, the code defines what constitutes wages, which includes your basic pay, dearness allowance, if payable, and retaining allowance, which is payable in certain cases. There are other certain components which are excluded from the ambit of definition of wages, which is your statutory bonus, house rental allowance, conveyance allowance, contribution towards pension and provident fund by the employer, overtime allowance. The new change provides that if an employee has received more than 50% of the total remuneration in the form of allowances and other specified excluded components which has been laid down in the code, then the excess amount would consider deemed to be wages for the purpose of your employment provident fund contribution, gratuity, ESIC, basically the social security contributions. Next slide, please. Now, the Code on Social Security subsumes 9 labor laws related to the Social Security, which includes your Employment Provident Fund, employee state insurance, gratuity, so on and so forth. The code has widened the coverage by including the unorganized sector, gig workers, platform workers. Basically, for example, to give you Uber, Ola driver, food delivery agents who were earlier not covered under these social security legislation. Platform worker is basically defined to meet a work arrangement which is kind of outside of traditional employee-employee relationship and using an online platform for problem solving or to provide specific services. A gig worker is a general term which basically means someone like it could be construed as a person who is working on a part-time basis or on an hourly basis, and this could be a temporary or which would be completed during a specified period of time. Another important aspect about this code of social security is that the gig workers and the platform workers would have to be registered themselves on a government portal in order to avail with respect to availing the social security benefits. Another major change under the Social Security Code is that now it provides an option to opt out. It provides an option to the establishments to opt out from the employment provident and employee state insurance to those who have been voluntarily covered under the same. So, as you know, for employment provident fund, many companies voluntarily, even though not reaching the mandatory threshold of 20 or more employees, they take the voluntary registration under the same. And the current law is right now silent on the provision of the opting out, but the Code of Social Security addresses this challenge. Also, there are setting up of career centers to replace the existing employment exchanges. Now, all establishments would have to notify vacancies of their job vacancies to these centers, thereby providing wider coverage of potential job opportunities to job seekers. Another very interesting feature which has been introduced is with regard to the provision of fixed term employment, which allows engagement of a worker for a fixed period of time based on the basis of the requirement and without restricting, and it is not restricted to any sector. Earlier, the fixed term employment was mostly seen to be restricted to apparel and textile sector, but the code has now extended to the across all sectors. Fixed term means a worker can be hired for any duration, whether it's 3 months or 6 months on or for a year. However, all statutory benefits will be given to them at par with the permanent workers. Such employees would be paid gratuity, even though they have served the period less than 5 years, and it would be paid on a pro rata basis. And it also clearly states that an employee on a fixed term employment shall be eligible if he renders service under the contract for a period of 1 year. Next slide, please. The occupational code. This code basically replaces your 13 labor laws, as you can see on the screen, relating to the safety, health, and deals with the health and working conditions, which include your Factories Act, contract labor, the interstate migrant workmen, so on and so forth. The code basically aims at lessening the burden on the employers, as it has decided to done away with the multiple registrations under the various enactments to one common registration, and it will be one license, and we get to see even one return. There are changes which have been introduced with respect to the contract labor. It says that it shall apply to establishments or contractors employing 50 or more workers on any day in the last preceding 12 months. The code, as you know, the current contract labor labor regulation basically prohibits engaging in contract labor into core activities. One interesting change that we get to hear is that this code basically introduces exceptions in the case where the contract labor may be engaged by an entity for a core activity. This is the thing where this is a situation where there are two cases where basically there has been a sudden increase in the volume of core activity, which needs to be completed within a stipulated period of time. And the second would be that the normal functioning of the concerned establishment is done. The activity in question is such a way that it is ordinarily could be carried out by the contract worker. And changes have been introduced for safeguarding the interest of the interstate migrant workers, which we got to see during this pandemic era, which in this line where they've said that the employer shall also be liable to pay to every interstate migrant worker every year a lump sum amount as journey allowance towards his travel to and fro from his native place. We see the threshold limit of factories has also been expanded to 20 or more workers with aid of power and 40 or more workers without the aid of power. Next slide, please. The last part, the Industrial Relations Code. This is in a very it is in line with with regard to doing ease of doing business in India, because generally the trade unions and the hurdles created one of the major challenges which is faced by the industries currently. So as you can see, the code proposes to protect the workers' right to form union, to minimize the dispute between the employees and the workers. Also, it aims to strike the balance between the rights of the employer and the workers, which basically which is set to entail increased productivity and effectiveness in the operations of the business. It is also set that it aims to circumvent the hurdles which often seem to be created by multiple trade unions in the form of strikes and factory lockdowns. As you can see, the Industrial Relations Code, which I've already covered, now has increased the threshold for retrenchment, closure or layoff without requiring government approval from 100 to 300 workers. Now, the code requires to give a prior notice of 14 days before a strike or a lockdown or a lockout. Earlier, the requirement of notice was given with regard to the public utility sector, but now it's been introduced here as well for the other sectors. It also prohibits strikes and lockout during up to 7 days after a conciliation proceeding or during and up to 60 days after the proceeding before the tribunal. With regard to the trade unions, where there is more than one trade union in an establishment, the sole negotiating union status will be given to one which has 51% of the employees or workers as its members. Where no union qualifies under this criteria, the employer must constitute a negotiating council consisting of representatives drawn from the various unions, with only those at least 20% of employee as its members. Every industrial establishment also employing 20 or more workers will have one or more grievance redressal committee for resolution of disputes arising with regard to the employees' grievances. The last point is that interesting feature is that the code also contains provisions according to which the employers and the workers can voluntarily take course of arbitration for the settlement of industrial disputes through a written agreement. And after the investigation and hearing of both the parties, the arbitrator will pass an arbitral award and could submit that to the government for the implementation. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation and hand over to Mr. Oza to take you through the future vision of Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan.
Thank you, Apurva. Now it's working. Yeah, let me quickly conclude with two slides, though I love from our end. Next slide, please. This picture always. It should. Slide, please. Yeah, thank you. I don't want to give the impression or leave the impression that we are just sugarcoating everything and trying to motivate unnecessarily further investments. But let's have a quick look on advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, it is a further push of Make in India, long discussed and pending reforms have been implemented, and I personally really like the concentration of the structural and infrastructural reforms. We all represent German companies, and we know how particular the infrastructure aspect is always for a German investor. That's probably as well one of the reasons, my interpretation, why China is always perceived by German investors as very positive, because it looks very positive. Let me put some disadvantages or highlight some disadvantages. I feel that we have to be little, and the government especially, have to be a little bit careful in the perception. The global perception of Atma Nirbhar is sometimes perceived as a resilient India and not a self-reliant India. Why? Because they feel that to foreclose now trade. And that is surely not in the intention and in the benefit of the German, of the Indian government and Indian economy. So we have to really emphasize that this is not a resilient India. It is a self-reliant India which can serve the globe. My biggest issue is the global tender and its local content. Yes, we do understand that there are requirements to obviously emphasize and give a good and fair chance to Indian companies, including foreign invested companies in India. However, we have to ensure that it does not fall on our own feet. We are putting now everything under a local content, everything under a local tender, which even cannot be given by or services or goods which cannot be provided by Indian entities. So why are we blocking ourselves? One foremost thing, what was always emphasized, that we want to be a high quality manufacturer. How can we do that if we resist all foreign technology? We cannot ask for foreign technology and do not and cannot be open for global tenders. That is a contradiction in itself. I'm pretty sure that many of you have suffered under inconsistent and very dynamic changes of the BIS norms and their requirements. It is really a concern for many companies. As Isha mentioned, there are different state policies. I think it would be all the states would be very well advised to harmonize the state subsidies in order not to become intra-India competition. Next slide, please. Next slide. I'll start already while the slide is changing. I see a huge future market on renewable energy sector, manufacturing, a big boost for companies who are into infrastructure, and the automotive sector, last but not least, because it has been, thank you very much, with the scrapping policy, recall policies, etc., pp, there's a new commitment to the very important industry driver, which is the automotive market. With that along, obviously the mechanical engineering sector can benefit. What are the reforms which are very urgently required from my perspective? Land acquisition reform, the jurisdictional reform, and what Mr. Moore had mentioned earlier, the multiple and bilateral investment protection and free trade agreements. It is important. It will just boost the Indian economy. The opportunities for German companies are export to India of high precision tools and machines, participation of infrastructure projects. We can see a huge boost in it, and I have emphasized it a couple of times. This is the big boost for the German industry in India. And yes, based on what Apurva and Isha have mentioned, manufacturing for the global market becomes more and more an attractive opportunity. Some further custom reliefs along with the free trade or free trade agreements would be very conclusive. Relaxation of permanent establishment rules, I think many of you do have issues with that. A higher acceptance of, if we want to boost infrastructure technology from outside, we have to permit as well, the government has to permit as well branch offices and project offices, and the exports incentives, state subsidies. These are all things which should further be in the focus of reforms. Subsidies like the 15% tax bracket for newly incorporated companies, manufacturing companies, should be expanded as well to already existing companies. I find it very discriminatory and should not last too long. With this and our last slide, please stay tuned with us. We have multiple platforms, events, and articles which we publish and issue. Happy to have you here. Thank you very much. I think we are now open to questions. Isha, Apurva, can you please switch on your cameras as well?
Yeah, Rahul, Isha and Apurva, thank you. Thank you very much. I think excellent presentation, and we had a good number of participants and quite a few questions have come in. We may not be able to take all the questions, but at least a few questions we will take. And if I may request, Rahul, the other questions maybe we could send to Rodl and partner, and if you could just prepare short replies to that. So when we send out the thanks mail, we can send that reply either as a sheet, attached sheet also. Rahul, let me come to you with the first question, which is a general question we feel, which I have faced also many times from the German companies. Now, many of the companies who are not into manufacturing, who are basically importing and selling here, they have more a sales and service setup. So the question for them is, does the Atma Nirbhar Bharat package as such help them in any way, such companies who are not manufacturing?
Yeah, the Atma Nirbhar is more focused for manufacturing companies, but in the light of the Atma Nirbhar, there have been as well multiple relaxations, changes in the MSME scheme be implemented, and that is quite interesting as well for the for trading companies, as they the definition have been increased the thresholds of the when you fall under it, and such things do benefit. People do leave it out and do not register under it because there's an additional compliance to be maintained then, and compliance means always we need a consultant for it, which people avoid. But there are really good benefits, should be reviewed.
Right. And I think it was very important, and thank you for bringing this slide, Rahul, where you spoke about the advantages and disadvantages. I think this is a very important slide for all of us to understand. Of course, the packages, Atma Nirbhar Bharat, PLI, it has certain advantages, but then there are certain shortcomings. And also, I would request all our viewers, we have some very senior CEOs also who have joined this panel discussion. This white paper, we've sent the survey. So I think this is very important that we get maximum participation from the companies, because then the issues you have can be brought forth in this white paper that Rodl and partner along with the VDMA and consulate is preparing. So my sincere request to all our members, please utilize this opportunity, utilize this survey to give your feedback. Let me come to now, Isha. We had a very interesting question, Isha. This was, is remission of duties and taxes on export product, the RODTEP, getting covered in the MOOD scheme? Can we get tax credits in case of exports of finished goods?
Okay. I would like to highlight here that the remission of duties and taxes on export products and MOVE, that is Customs Bonded Warehouse, are two separate schemes and provided by the BIC. So the benefits under these schemes can be availed individually without restriction under the other scheme. However, the person who is availing has to check whether all the requirements under the respective schemes have been met to avail such benefits.
Purva, let me come to you with some questions related to the labor codes. Actually, there are a few questions which have come, which are, I think, similar in nature, talking about PF because of the 50% basic, I think basic salary has to be 50%. So people are a little apprehensive regarding payment of bonus and how PF should be calculated. So maybe I'll just read one of the questions. Now this says, clarify more on new labor codes, whether 1,800, 12% of 15,000 as minimum PF limit will continue under the new code of Social Security.
Yes, this is a very important question, a very interesting question actually. Yes, to tell you this, yeah, there has been apprehension with regard to the revised definition of wages, where they are now saying that the excluded components, if it exceeds 50%, then it would have to be taken into account for your statutory social security contribution. Now, answering this specific question regarding this 18,000, which basically comes from the wage ceiling limit, which is there under the Employees Provident Fund Act, 15,000, that the both employer and the employee have the basically option to restrict their contribution to 15,000 rupees. Now this 18, for me, I cannot comment whether this would be implemented, this 1800, because the codes are silent, because right now the codes said the wage ceiling would be to the amount which would be to be soon to be notified, which we'll get to see in the rules. But yes, so I'm sure there will be some rules where there will be provision of capping this contribution, but this we cannot comment on it, which we'll get to see later on.
Apurva, also, do we have clarity? Because when actually these codes would be implemented. It was to be implemented from 1st of April, but then now with the COVID wave coming in and the certain uncertainties, political uncertainties also. So what do you feel? Would they be implemented in the near future? Do we have any sort of a guiding light here or a guiding target here?
So as of now, we are like with my colleague Mr. Rosa, like we will take this up and all. We try to get out, like what would be the exact, the implementation date. And yes, it has been deferred, and it was earlier to be notified by 1st of April. But we have to see one thing: there are challenges in the sense current situation facing the India facing pandemic, and like I already mentioned, the state governments have to notify these rules within the states. And also, I would want to point out that there are some changes which I already discussed about in my presentation with regard to Industrial Relations Code, which sort of has also kind of created little bit of, you can say, ripple amongst the trade unions as well. So I feel this period could also be taken as a time for the government, because the whole, what is the main intention? The main intention is to, so that balance as much as possible with regard to interest of the employers as well as workmen. But then they are saying it will be implemented soon. So let's sit tight and wait and watch.
I have the
yes, yeah, continue.
I think it will be somewhere between the moment when the vaccination drive has reached a certain threshold where the likelihood of a further wave or tsunami is limited, and when the government is again in good books of the voters. That will be a time when we can expect it. So I guess last quarter of this year. However, it is very important, and I emphasize that always, during the GST implementation, everyone was sitting relaxed and waiting, theek hai, dekha jayega when it will come. And then suddenly people could not implement their invoicing. Please do not be relaxed here, because this government has shown that if they suddenly one day wake up and say we will implement it, they will implement it, and then there's no change time to react on that in an appropriate manner. So be prepared now already.
Right.
Yes.
Let me come to you with the next question. Can all export benefits under FTP and customs regulation be taken in bonded warehouse separately, simultaneously? Sorry.
So this is a very similar question to the earlier one, actually. So all the benefits under FTP and customs are exclusive, and except for duty drawback available under section 74 and 75 of the customs regulations, all the benefits under FTP and customs do not have a specific exclusion for claiming subsequent benefits of more or customs bonded warehouse. The eligibility to customs export benefits would depend on the respective schemes. And in case the respective schemes or the criteria and the respective schemes are fulfilled, then an applicant can apply for these schemes. However, as I explained earlier, the duty drawback is not eligible if you go for customs bonded warehouse.
Right. And Isha, you spoke also about the PLI scheme. Now, is eligibility under the PLI scheme for a given year achieved if one of these threshold criteria, either incremental sale or sale of manufactured goods over the base year, or investment, would, if one of the criteria are fulfilled, would the company be still eligible?
No, actually the applicant company has to meet both the threshold criteria, that is the investment criteria and incremental sale criteria, to be eligible to avail incentives under PLI scheme.
Right. Okay. Rahul, can I come to the last question to you? Now, Rahul, one aspect is certainly we keep on talking about India's role in the global value chain. India has to increase its role in the global value chain. Now, when we look at, for example, the PLI scheme, we are talking of benefit on incremental growth. There is actually no incentive given to export. So do you think the government would need to modify this slightly so that some incentive is also given for export?
Actually, Isha is the better judge here. But in general, and please, Isha, interrupt me if I'm saying something wrong. But we are still awaiting the export incentives scheme. So we'll see how that was supposed to happen in April. Didn't come as of now, right, Isha? And that will be then the right time to see whether it is how to fine-tune the PIL scheme. In general, the thresholds are perceived as too high. It will not really benefit many companies. It will benefit only the big players like Apples and Samsungs. Along with that, the crumples can be whatever is remaining on the crumples. Small, medium-sized companies can benefit, but that shouldn't be actually the aim of the government, because on the one hand we are enhancing the MSME schemes. On the other hand, we are not really boosting it with big incentives, and that is, by the way, as well my big criticism on the state incentives. They are too high. If we see, for example, in at least some state governments have put 500 crores as a mega project. Yeah. Maharashtra is putting it only, qualifies it then as a large project. Come on, we need jobs, we need to create jobs, so we need to really incentivize on a real-time and realistic basis. I think if I can pick up a question, Rajeshji, there was a question what VDMA is doing to further where was the question?
Government of India global tender, yes.
Yeah.
I think this would largely, the white paper, we will utilize this also. I'm sure this point will come up, Rahul. So together with you, we can try to see what can be done, because as you rightly pointed out, with this restriction, and as you correctly also mentioned, there are a few concrete cases which we have come across. Certain quality of steel is not available, and then you're not allowing that to be imported also, or under the global tender restrictions. So I think these are very valuable points, and I think in the white paper we should try to highlight this also.
I would like to add here one aspect. We are currently supporting a couple of German companies or European companies in representations, individual representations, to waive off such local content topics. The more we have such cases where we highlight to the government that this does not make sense, what you are asking for, the more impacted the white paper which VDMA and Rodl and partner is going to present will have its impact. So I'm inviting companies to contact us if they are suffering under the global content, global tender or local content issues.
Right. Thank you, Rahul. Isha, maybe the last question for you is that now auto component sector. Now this is a major contributor to our GDP. It is also among the sectors mentioned under the PLI scheme, but however, the details are not available, especially for this sector. When is there a time timeline when more details this, and also textile sector, handmade fiber. This is again a major employment generator. So when can one expect to get more information from government on this?
Well, these schemes are already announced for textile sector and automobile products, but these schemes are not approved by the ministries, respective ministries. And since in the last 2-3 months, several other PLI schemes were approved. So we can expect that these schemes, these 4 pending schemes, will also be approved this year.
So thank you. Thank you for taking up all the questions so competently. And as I said, we will send you across the questions what we could not take up during this Q&A session. So I would just maybe like to conclude our web seminar today. So thank you very much, Rodl, Isha and Apurva, for the excellent presentation and for taking up all the questions from our members and participants. Also, I would like to thank Dr. Mohad for his very interesting address. And of course, I would like to thank all our participants. We've got some very senior people who have joined this webinar. So thank you very much for taking out time and for participating in this web seminar today. Friends, let me conclude as we are in the midst of a very strong second wave of COVID, and many have lost friends, relatives in these difficult circumstances. Our prayers goes all to the families of the people who have lost their loved and dear ones. And let me conclude with a quote or a phrase from Bhagavad Gita, which may give us some solace in these difficult times. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer months. They arise from sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So friends, stay safe, all of you. Wishing you all good health, you, your families, and all your loved ones. And let us overcome this pandemic together. Thank you very much and stay safe. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.